So we've got to make more cuts.
UK Chancellor George Osborne has warned that 2014 will be a year of hard truths and that there will be more substantial spending cuts if the Conservative Party is re-elected at the next general election. £25 billion to be precise, with £12 billion of that coming from the welfare budget, with the Chancellor targeting council housing for the better off and housing benefits for the under-25s. But by spelling out just exactly how much pain there could be to come under a future Tory government, the Chancellor is making a bold political gamble.
Well, Labour, the polls consistently show, are behind George Osborne on the question of economic credibility, people who you trust to run the economy. So George Osborne's determined to put it back onto the territory he wants to fight the election on, which is on fiscal credibility. The reason he's put this £25 billion figure right up there at the front of the political debate is he wants to ask Labour, what would you do to fill in that £25 billion hole? Would you cut welfare? Would you put up taxes? Would you borrow more? And if they can't answer any of those questions, or are not prepared to answer those questions, then George Osborne's election strategy comes into place, which is basically Labour is the party of welfare, more borrowing and higher taxes. That's where he wants Labour to be, but it's a very high-risk strategy because no political party that I can think of has ever gone into a general election promising at the heart of their election campaign to cut public spending by such a large amount and putting such a specific and scary price tag on it.
Mr Osborne is gambling that promising cuts to the welfare budget, which polls suggest that the electorate see as Labour's weakness, will pay off.
The way that the country's been run in the past 10 to 15 years, it's created a position where a hard line needs to be taken in things such as benefits.
I do believe that the Labour government Labour Party are weak in the benefit system.
But it's the state pension that Mr Osborne has promised to protect that dominates welfare spending. And with housing benefit for the under-25s worth just a small fraction of the overall housing benefits budget, Mr Osborne has set himself a difficult challenge.
Well, if you think the welfare budget is roughly £200 billion a year, half of that goes to people over pension age, and that's been ruled out for cuts. So it really begins to get rather difficult to find 12 billion from about roughly 100 billion, because that's more than 10%. And when you think that the big majority of that goes to people who are sick and disabled, not the unemployed, not lone parents. So when you actually sort of start to think, are you actually going to get £12 billion out of this budget, it gets really quite difficult.
Charities across the country, meanwhile, are warning of the catastrophic impact the cuts could have on some of the most vulnerable people in society.
I'm responsible for here quite a number of under-25s. The majority of them don't want to live on benefits. They don't choose a lifestyle of benefits. The majority of them are people who life has dealt a bad card. If we decide that there is savings to be had in the welfare budget, the approach we must adopt, therefore, is to say, within the context of people who are the most vulnerable, how do we protect them, whatever their age? Selecting an age group seems to me unduly punitive to that age group, and it seems to me rather absurd.
I became homeless, wasn't getting on with my family anymore, so it was decided that I couldn't live with them anymore. So I started living in B&Bs and hostels, and it was like a year, 2 years before I came to Centrepoint. But when I did, I've been able to sort my life out. It's been hard, I've received benefits, especially housing benefit. I couldn't go and move back in with my parents. Just for some people it's not possible. The under-25s that need it, it's like, basically, if they're not getting some help, they're just going to become homeless, and who wants to be living on the streets?
In Mr Osborne's year of hard truths, his political opponents face some hard choices. There may be some question marks over whether the Chancellor's proposed cuts make economic sense, but his tactic is clear. By spelling out exactly how tough things will be under a future Tory government, he hopes to force Labour on the defensive. And he's gambling on voters keeping faith in his stewardship of the economy. Daniel Garrahan, Financial Times, London.